In this short video, we're going to talk about the costs of poor quality. My name's Chris Docherty. I work for FQM, a QHSE compliance software and training organisation, and hope this short video gives you an insight into why measuring the cost of poor quality is an important factor. At the end of this video, we're going to talk to you about a link to another video that can give you much more detailed information. So what is the cost of poor quality? Well, effectively this dates back to around the 80s and possibly even before then. Companies try to identify the hidden costs of poor quality. What do we mean by that? These are activities, time, money, which is spent addressing things that have gone wrong or addressing areas that need further attention that we're not aware of. It's a belief that if we invest more in the detection and the improvement of these areas, we can reduce the cost that's input to our services and products that we provide. All activities and processes that do not meet the agreed performance or do not exceed the expectations of our business have hidden costs within them. And how do we identify what those are? Well, we will have to think about, would these costs disappear if we were more efficient and more effective in how we ran our business? So let's think about that in a little bit more detail. So we like to use a concept called the Iceberg Effect, which many of you I'm sure will have heard of. So the iceberg that we see, the tip that sits on top of the surface of the water, these are the clear indications that we think have been the costs associated to something that has gone wrong, something that is not as efficient and effective as we want it to be. So these are the costs associated to dealing with a customer complaint, to dealing with scrap in our production line, dealing with downtime, late deliveries, raw material that doesn't arrive on time or is late. Underneath the sea level, there is a great big structure of an iceberg that we cannot see often. These are the things that really have a greater impact in the costs and times associated to things that go wrong. These can be the time of management involved in dealing with something. These can be the costs associated to putting something right. These can be a multitude of various things, ultimately that come down to time, and as we know in a business, time is money. So it's important that we analyse our errors, our mistakes, our inefficiencies in greater detail so that we can identify what the costs are associated to this. And importantly, what we want to do is when we recognise what these are, we want to minimise them as much as possible by driving improved quality measures within our organisation. What do we mean by that? Well, loss of productivity, loss of production time, moving items from one location to another because they were incorrectly ordered to the wrong place. There is a multitude of things that we can look at here, and every business is a little bit different. The important thing is to understand how we measure that and the method we use to do that. Measurement is important in the early stages of this so that we can start to identify what the costs are associated to poor quality. Within an organisation, no one's perfect. No one has the perfect business all of the time. Of course, there can be human error, process-based errors, technological errors, systematic errors, and simply there can be a culture of errors because that is the way our business has always operated. But when we start to communicate and involve more of the workforce in identifying where things are not as efficient as we would like them to be, this is when we can grasp the opportunity to identify them and share with others within the business of what costs are associated to this. Because ultimately, the more efficient and effective our business is, the stronger we can be, and we can adapt ongoing to narrow this down to be more efficient as time goes on. When we analyse this, we want to look at the true cost of these errors and failures. We want to understand what time has been spent to resolve it, whether management has been involved, whether additional employees are taking longer to do something. Is it that errors within a process are being reworked regularly and lessons are not being learned from it? In organisations, we often hear about companies that record opportunities for improvement, non-conformances, customer complaints, lessons learned from projects. But what we don't hear as much about is what they do with that data. It's all well and good recording the information, but ultimately if we do not do something to improve upon it, then we are just setting a culture of recording information, not measuring and analysing it. To really compare and understand these costs, we have to involve more people within the organisation and try and get them to understand the benefit that would come from this. Involve them in understanding the times and the issues and the rework and the scrap and the errors that occur, and give them a greater picture of what often can go on in the background when something has been sent to a customer incorrectly, when something has been delivered, a service to a client that's not been as effective as you would expect it to be. When that client wants that mistake corrected, what is involved from your business to be able to do that? What is time is invested to correct that? It's also important to think that this may not be errors that has occurred within your organisation. It could be that your customers are identifying initially that you have caused a problem, and you're investing time and effort to investigate and ultimately present to the customer that the error is not your fault. We have a couple of case studies from this that we can present. One associated to a manufacturing organisation with a significant scrap level that they believed was down to old equipment that was not as effective and efficient as it was once. The other case study is about a service company where they found that teams of individuals going out to do an installation or a repair were having significant downtime because the raw material, the parts they needed, were not getting delivered on time. I would suggest that you take a chance to look at these case studies in a little bit more detail. They may give you some tips to understand. If we talk about the manufacturing one, for example, this client clearly thought the root cause of their problems was associated to old equipment and were accepting with that scrap level. The scrap cost was associated to approximately 5% of the organisation's turnover. 5% is quite significant, and it associated to around about 17.5k. Now, when we helped this client and gave them some guidance around how they could start to monitor it, what we very quickly found was that 45%, almost half of that 5% scrap level, remember the value 17.5k, was associated to human error. It was incorrect setup of the equipment. And ultimately, what we find is that the poor old machines were only associating about 15% of the problem to the scrap level. And then you have to think about that 17.5k that was costing that company in scrap. Let's think about that in a little bit more detail. They had not included within that the time it takes to take that scrap out of the production line, the time it takes to involve the workforce handling the scrap, storing the scrap, ordering more material, adding additional runs to their production line. When we start to go into the detail, remember the things that happen below the surface of the iceberg, we start to see that there is greater involvement of time to deal with these errors and ultimately time is money. Let's involve the workforce in this situation, and this is exactly what happened. They got more engaged, they got more involved, and ultimately, within a short period of time, that scrap level went from 5% to 3.5%. With huge involvement and a targeted project to work on this, they are continuing this journey and slowly seeing improvements month on month. In the case of the example of the service organisation, this was an organisation that had relatively large numbers of situations where teams were going to service locations and did not have the material they had requested at the locations on time. And in some cases, the wrong material. Yes, there were some errors within their own organisation, but ultimately it came down to their suppliers, their supply chain, not recognising the impact that it had on the business. The company started to record this, the lost time, meaning the 4 guys in the team spending 4 hours getting to a site to find out either the wrong part was there or the part had not arrived. Then travelling back. There was the requirement for the vehicle, the fuel, and the costs associated to that vehicle. There was the time of calling into the office and someone in the office handling that call and then subsequently reporting that to management, and also going to the supplier and chasing up the supplier and the delivery organisation to find out where the material was. Gathering this data over a 6-month period, it was very easy to put costs associated to this and what the impact was on the business. Ultimately, what we got to was a figure of around about £28,000 of lost time. That was in a 6-month period, and it was associated to a certain number of jobs. And it came down to approximately about £744 per job. This company was able to communicate this as they had recorded the data back to their suppliers and outlined to their suppliers the impact it was having on them, giving non-conformances to the suppliers and expecting credits and support from them. Ultimately, what they were doing was driving initiatives to close out on poor quality down into their critical supply chain. They started getting credit notes associated to these events of a value of about £400 each one. But ultimately what they found over the next 6-month period was the number of events dropped dramatically. More people were aware of this inefficiency, more people were aware of what went on underneath the surface of the water, the other people in the organisation that had to be involved, and the knock-on effect. Remember, that team that were completing that job still had to go back out and do it at a later date. And that has a knock-on effect on other clients, the reputation of the organisation. So it's important we understand and communicate within our workforce. We gather the data and analyse it, and that gives us the capability to work through these costs of poor quality. Takeaways from this is, have we really identified the true costs of error within our business? What about hidden costs? What about management involvement, other people's time? What about resources that have been required to do that activity? We need to identify these key areas and tackle them and make sure we involve the workforce more so they know why we're doing this. I hope that's helped a little bit with your understanding of the cost of poor quality. Please take the opportunity to look at another video we've done that's got into greater detail about quality management, the hidden benefits of a quality management system, and also more details into the introduction of a quality management system. This is a good training video you can share with your workforce and is available on our LinkedIn channel. Please follow us. Our YouTube channel, please subscribe, and also this content can be obtained on our website.